on a plane, you can hit that. I will likely be on a plane, or Vegas will have kidnapped me. So I'm sorry, I probably won't make the December 8th one.
April 8th. You'll make it.
Oh no, didn't you say there's a Let's Talk Friday in December? That is December 8th?
Right, yeah. December 10th.
10th. That's the week of
I think it's the 8th that you wrote.
Oh, December, correct. Yeah, you're right.
IGSB's over on Thursday, though. This is Friday. Yeah.
Anyway, let's get started. I did not prepare a presentation. We had a discussion about where did we want to go and what pieces of information we want to talk about. Between Kevin and I, we can cover a lot, and I do have slides on this computer, and I can share anything that we want to hop into.
Yeah, I don't really have much of an agenda on this either. I think I was on the last one of these with John Shavako. We were talking about the 500-foot rule and all the fun advances that we're dealing with that in its infancy here. And I'm here to support and answer questions if anybody needs anything.
So I think what I would like to talk about, and it comes up a lot in just general conversation, is just what do we need to do to figure out how to increase our drilling capacity? How do we get more humans that are drillers? How do we get more equipment that those humans can drill with? And how do we engage our young people to choose this as a field?
Over the New York-GEO basically is blazing the way on a lot of this. And we've had many great conversations since the conference on how do we increase, if we talk equipment capacity from the beginning. I've worked for two of the bigger rig manufacturers, and now with Venture, who is the largest Atlas Copco Epiroc dealer in the Western US, I have had the ear of the big, fat, and happy rig manufacturers. And for the longest time, we've averaged 65 rigs, and part of that comes to as when I was director of R&D for George E. Failing Company, which made the first portable drill rig in North America. When we go to Peterbilt or Mac or any of them, they ask us for what amount of trucks do we want to buy this year, not what we believe. We have a little bit of wiggle room in a forecast, but if you look at the Peterbilt truck that is desired and how it's changed with Tier 4, and you look at the Mac and the other ones, they are dump trucks, cement trucks, and garbage trucks, and then they're drill rigs. And so if we think we can sell 30 rigs, and if you think of a cost of goods on a piece of equipment being $800,000 and it retails for $1.2 million, and that's just loose numbers. Suddenly trucks is a big deal to us because we have a big percentage of our entire year's, funding tied up in a truck. And then when you do the same with hydraulic parts and whatnot, and as we've talked about electric rigs or where we go, Komatsu, Caterpillar, John Deere, those teams, take up all the hydraulic bandwidth and all the electric bandwidth that we can get. So a big piece for us in increasing capacity is track-mounted rigs. But then if we look at the 100 million bore feet that we've proposed in New York, how much of that ends up being small and rural? If we look at a good track-mounted rig that weighs 60,000 pounds and requires a truck and trailer, and we're going to do a 30-hole or a 100-hole project, it's hard for that to fit. It's exactly why Kevin runs the Epiroc rigs he runs, is because they're agile and he can be on a site or he can be off a site fast. So equipment capacity, we're seeing a ramp up, but to go from 20 rigs a year to 30 rigs a year, everybody there is making more money and, over capacity in the first place. And so it's going to take new players. It's going to take non-traditional manufacturers. It's going to take some government funding. There's a lot of pieces to that magic rig. And now we say, let's go beyond 500 feet. But we also need a small footprint. We've suddenly went from sledgehammers to laser scalpels, and nobody thought about this 18 months ago.
I'll chime in on it. I mean, I don't know that the change in footage changes the capacity on the drilling side. I've been a champion over the years of saying, show me demand, we will fill in capacity. For years, if we said to Epiroc or the collective rig producing agencies in this country, possibly farther internationally, industry needs 100 rigs in the next 18 months. We need 300 rigs in the next 4 years. And those orders are being placed. Pretty sure that manufacturing will find a way to meet that demand. Until we get to the point where we're not talking about possible drill sites and asking the very beginning end of this gigantic food chain to be the ones to ramp up and meet capacity, to see the demand and the number of boreholes out there that would support X number of rigs. It's still relatively limited in New York State. There's 6, 7, 8 drill companies bidding on every single commercial project in most of New York State. So clearly we have excess capacity available, in my opinion. Until it starts to narrow down where we don't have enough rig to meet current demand, we're not there yet.
I was in Europe a month ago to the International Drilling Show in Italy, and there were major European manufacturers, and there was a buzz that NY-GEO was in demand for rigs, and some of these manufacturers, they manufacture 300 to 400 rigs a year, and you're going to see in the next 6 months, probably not the number of rigs you'd like to see in the marketplace. We're going to see a lot of machines out there that have been purchased. It just takes about 6 to 8 months for them to come to the States, but they're coming.
Great, Jim, you have your hand raised.
Me unmute. Yes. So recently, Kathy O'Ninn's given a couple presentations, one for California Geo, and she was talking again about the Swedish drilling and the smaller rigs. And I know Kevin and I had a conversation about it after, and I know there's varying opinions about the small rigs. We know that probably you don't want to use something like that for a big commercial project. They really couldn't keep up. But what's your thoughts about going to some of the smaller rigs for residential, Brock?
It's a great question. And the joke used to be when I was a fluids and drilling engineer with Halliburton, if it ended in Iria or Stan, send Brock. And so what I got to learn was what the most readily available piece of equipment was the best equipment for the job. Try to not over-engineer it. But then we needed to decide, time and fuel, what it was going to take to do it. And so as I look at different geologies, and I know I have a smaller rig and I have a alternative method I want to try, if it's water hammer, or if it's casing advance, or if it's air, or it's mud rotary, I need to divide the state up. And, this is what I've done when I was director of wells for Suez. we took the area and we divided it up, and we specifically targeted equipment right for the job. So if we're going to go into the residential space, there still isn't a one size fits all. And why there's 23 million private water wells in the United States. And when we start looking at the Northeast, the East Coast, and the upper Midwest, and then Florida being the majority of those, it's all varying different equipment, technology from, old school cable tool, analog, to very advanced. And so I welcome smaller equipment. We just have to understand we can increase rotation. We can change some of the drilling methods, but penetration rates don't necessarily increase unless you have the actual weight of a machine to help with those penetration rates. The same with the challenge we have with keeping a hole, without a lot of deviation. If we look at like the American Water Works Association's, requirements for deviation in a hole, and this has come up a lot lately, unless it's purposeful deviation, it's more tooling and string weight. So when we increase string weight and tooling, you have to have the rig that can pull that back at X depth. So if we decide a territory is great and we can start bringing in these smaller rigs and this is going to be streamlined, it's going to take consistency in saying, you know what, I guess we better have enough footprint to do 250, 300 foot holes or 150 foot holes, and then manpower and ergonomics. We sacrifice with horsepower and size, making our people do more. I was just in Kiowa Island, South Carolina. They were running Simcoe 2,800 drills, 10-foot rods. One guy was handling the tooling. The other guy was drilling. That demand down there for a 350-foot hole was $7,000. Mind you, the homes I was looking at were about 1,800 per square foot was the price, and they were third and fourth homes, and the demand was there, and they could put that little rig and charge what they needed to be profitable.
Yeah, and I'll echo that also, Brock. I mean, there has to be a give and take. You go smaller rigs, it typically does mean shallower bores. That 300, 350 range, you can get to 500 depending on what you're dealing with. But as we try to progress to deeper typically means horsepower, weight, ability to move fluids, ability to deal with any type of unforeseen circumstances that you see. So as we've said before, Jim, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox. There is no right or wrong way to do it. Let's just go get it done.
Well, I guess maybe what I'm alluding to is, would we expect drillers to have some investment in smaller rigs as well as the bigger? I would assume they're considerably less expensive. Maybe.
So I'll say this: how many bores do you want? How deep do you need them to be? Let's sign a contract, and drillers will invest in the tool needed to execute the work. Are drillers going to invest up front? There probably are companies that are willing to do that and try to create that demand that way. The industry as it exists right now likely is not going to go out and buy a tool for a potential emerging market.
Yeah,
The dollars just don't exist for it. When we buy a rig to last 20, 25 years, and it's part of our fleet, and we'll add to it over time, but it's specialized drilling. We don't chase that yet.
I'd like to
I
kind of
love-
just chime in a little bit here, if that's all right. That was Kathy's presentation about the small Italian rigs that they use in Sweden. They have their place. They're good for Westchester County. They're good for the Hudson Valley. They can handle crystalline bedrock pretty well. I don't think anybody is under the delusion that those things are going to go past 600 feet depth. That's not going to happen. Fundamentally, it's up to each company and what kind of how they see their work broken out. If Dandelion handles residential work in Westchester County, then that rig works for them. When they want to be involved in commercial work, that rig will no longer be the tool they're using to do it. And that's fine. It's just to Kevin's point, to Brock's point, we need all of these options on the table, but at the same time, not all options are required in every part of the state. You know, Dandelion operates everywhere from Westchester up to Vermont. They have sonic rigs, they have truck mounted rigs, they have conventional rigs. That's to be able to handle all the varying geologies of a very geologically diverse area. Yeah, I don't think there's any one solution. And Jim, I don't necessarily know that bringing small footprint rigs gets more drilling done. I'm not necessarily convinced of that. I think it gets us into tighter spots, you know, maybe smaller residential jobs, but the industry can handle the drilling needs right now.
Well, from what I got from Kathy's presentation, it sounded like the compressor section was maybe half of it, and it was out on the street, and they connected it with the high pressure hose. So that was how they made this rig small. Yeah. So the weight's not going to be there, and you know, I understand that. I think part of what she was saying, maybe they're less expensive to buy, and if you can only do one job a day residential, I mean, if you can drill 5 times faster with a bigger rig, would it make a difference? Could you actually get 2 jobs a day? You thought about mobilizing, etc.
Yeah, it's a matter of like mobilizing. You have like a TH60 or something. I don't know how long that thing is, but I can liken it to the length of the NY-GEO Geo 600 plus the length of the compressor. When you can break that into 2 components and leave one on the street and use one to drill, obviously you're more accessible. Fundamentally, I think it's a bit cheaper. The NY-GEO might come in at like $300,000, something like that. Then you have to get tooling and the compressor, which is standalone, and compressors have gone up in price a lot recently. I really think it's fundamentally, what does your market and geology call for?
Well, here's where I'm coming from. I get to talk to Donovan Gordon once a month with NJ Cat. We have a standing conversation. He keeps asking us, please tell us what you need. Okay. And we kind of keep putting out this mixed message of, well, this works, that doesn't work, this could work here. I mean, they don't know, maybe like I don't know all about drilling, but we need to be able to articulate what we need to get the work, not only the work done, but get it done at a reasonable cost. And so we can start heading towards a mass market. And I think that's incumbent on us in some way of putting that together.
We can't walk before we can run. I mean, there's been this historical race to the bottom saying that drilling needs to be cheaper. It is the asset that makes this technology work above and beyond anything else from start to finish. Again, you know, we've said this, it's about the demand. I've yet to see the demand exceed capacity in New York State. Does that mean that I can show up on a Monday to drill something that you call me for today? Absolutely not, because we have schedules and Mother Nature plays a role and everything like that. But I have yet to see a point in time where demand exceeds capacity in New York State, doing this for 15 years. So we need to focus on creating demand, and that's not the driller's responsibility to try to influence demand by cutting prices. It's the highest trade skill in the industry.
So, hey, Kevin, I think the approach that they've been taking, starting when NY-GEO back in 2017 and now with the utilities, trying to stimulate demand by giving really nice incentives on top of now what we have is the IRA, which is another, big incentive.
But Jim, where the incentives go? They don't go to the driller. They go to the heat pump installer. They go to the box. They
Well,
don't touch the ground loop, which is what
I-
we've said. Incentivize the loop if you want to change the pricing to the end user. But the incentives rarely end up on the driller side or the loop side of the equation.
Well, it seems
So-
like we've gone 360 degrees here, because once upon a time when we started this way back, everybody understood that the incentive was basically because the loop cost, that the equipment was maybe a little bit more expensive, but not dramatically more than air source. The ductwork is the same. The labor inside is about the same. So the incentive was meant to go towards the loop. And you're basically saying that it's really not getting there. So we need to maybe think about how we could do it. I just think the bottom line is we have to articulate as an organization how we can better approach this, and maybe the incentive needs to change somehow. So the
Well, I
I
think on the commercial side, you're starting to see that a little bit because, now you see these massive IRA numbers and how they play into, changing the actual cost of projects, especially when you're dealing with not-for-profit or state entities or any place that's.
Okay, so here I want to break the giant glass jar that we've created here, because we've somehow, and me working in Michigan and in the West Coast and the East Coast, and watching a dozen states scale and look at all different problems from big rigs to little rigs and whatnot. We say we need drillers, so then we immediately go the water well drillers. If we can get them on board, we have more work for them. We need them to be looking at residential for us, or we need the ones that are capable to scale up and do. We need big rigs. We need little rigs. We need, something that's going to be less fuel, consumptive and less dollar point, but we still have a human factor that needs to make a self-sustaining wage. So one, we still have a person that needs to make more than they can working in an Amazon warehouse, which seem to pop up in every rural area. But here's the bigger deal. HVAC professionals need to buy little rigs for residential and small commercial. It's not the responsibility of a big company that wants to scale and do large scale thermal networks and colleges and this stuff to get little rigs and big rigs. When you're a company like Dandelion, or you're a company that is selling the box and the whole, there's a whole lot of shuffling we can do, and there's a value to that. A water well drilling company, that bread and butter is a maintenance program, a water well, a pump. People come into that home, they go, oh, you have well water? And then they go, here, drink a glass. And they go, damn, that's some great water. But nobody stands next to the heating unit and goes, do you feel that heat? That heat's fantastic. So we have an identity crisis there, but we truly do. We need a new set of drilling companies that their win is putting in more ground source geothermal heat pumps. And that comes from a company that has a maintenance program and a lifelong customer. It's really hard for a water well drilling company like Yordy and Sons, who does geothermal and water at the time. If that big well came up, there was a well, there was a pump, and there was a 30-year life cycle. A water well driller comes in now, punches 5 holes for the same price they would for that water well, has the same wear and tear, but no wind. We need the little rigs, but if we look at a price per foot for residential or small commercial versus scaling up and doing a Ball State, it's like apples to watermelons. I'll lower my hand now.
So Colin mentioned the Kamakios. There's some equipment out in the market where really you need a second person only for safety purposes. Most of the time, one person can do the job. The Kamakyo, one of the Kamakios I brought from Europe back in 2008 was the MC 900 GT. And this had a 400 carousel type of casing that one person with the joystick can do the job. So what happens is in the last 10 years, some drillers, owners have one driller expert and 2 or 3 other machines run by 1 month, 2 month operators that know how to play the joystick. So this is where you could improve on having seasoned drillers out there with proper equipment. The other thing is, and we're still buying up, in fact, there's this Camacho machine now there's another 10 or 15 machines coming up to North America. These are the latest model. The other thing is I mentioned this at the New York panel. Back when the people were changing from oil to gas, the gas utility had this program to say, listen, I have a gas line, and this gas line is at this address. If you get me 5 additional customers on that block that all they want is a hot water tank, I'll be running that gas line within 2 months. And anybody that is going to be, anybody that's going to buy this thing and they're going to have this line in, I'll make sure that the grass in the front will be better than before. So if a utility really wants to do this, and you take a rig that goes from house to house to house, whether it be big or small rig, make sure that you have stays clean so that it doesn't disrupt the neighborhood. This is a possibility, but it has to be people with deep pockets, utilities like Dandelion that can take a chance and say, okay, I'm going to drill a hole in each individual home, and then see if in 2 years or 5 years the cap on trade or whatever it is on the CO2 costs so much money, then the people will hook up on my line. And this could be on an easement, the same way as a utility. It's a possibility. This is one way to get, and then you could maybe use a coil rig, okay, in order to get that thing in faster than others. So there's a possibility, but it has to be done in a big scale by people with deep pockets. Sorry.
The only thing I'll say to that is the minute somebody goes into the industry collectively, it could be a general submission of, we have 10,000 boreholes that we want done in the next 5 years. It could be 10,000 in the next 3 years. And contractors have the ability to say, I have the ability to execute 1,000 bores in the next 2.5 years. And now you have that work scope ahead of you. You have the runway, the lead time leading up to it. Industry will meet that. Right now, the way that the geo industry works, the drilling industry works, I'm out selling a bore. One of my other geothermal heat pump installation companies is selling a project. There's a commercial project here and there. And so there's a lot of work to sell the 1, the 2, the 3. To Gino's point, and to what Dandelion is kind of working on, and some things like that. Once we start to see a massive number of boreholes set in front of industry of, here's my contract for the next 3 to 5 years. Now we will start executing more cost effectively, more reasonably, more volumetrically. That will happen. How do we get there?
Something I would like to say is that Kevin had brought up earlier, a lot of the incentive money goes to the box in the house and not to the borehole. I can speak on behalf of Con Ed and say that we are interested in exploring programmatic options that would separately incentivize the borehole from the heat pump. And we're very much open to talking to NY-GEO about what that might look like.
That would be phenomenal.
You know, and
So-
the USDA has funding that is for where there's rural areas for municipalities and water infrastructure to be able to provide, you know, water wells or pipelines. And there is funding out there. And I think a big piece to everything that we want to win at is treating our bore fields like infrastructure, the same as our water and wastewater infrastructure, which is 100 years old. I posted a LinkedIn post last night because I laughed so hard. I got targeted for a solar ad that had a solar panel powered camera unit that said, we are preventing theft of solar fields. And I'm going, wow, you know, Mother Nature kind of gives us what we need and also protects us from thieves taking our field away, and we still have the green space. So, you know, we truly are a 52x, you know, infrastructure that once it's in place, it's going to be there, and we keep the green space to whatever we want to make it into, instead of it becoming a used 400 acres or block or whatever of, you know, nothing else can be there.
The cost of a heat pump, my background is heat pumps with General Electric a long time ago, but also with we put in a lot of Climate Master, Command Airs, going back. The cost of a heat pump today, it seems to be, you could probably buy a small car for the same cost as a 4-ton or a 5-ton heat pump. And there's no way that you have a dozen components in a heat pump, and you have the manufacturing, let's say, whether it be Oklahoma or Indiana or whatever. There's no way that the cost of investment in a car manufacturing company and putting out a car and the warranty and the geothermal, you know, that's one of the questions you had, is that water well, you have service for 30 years. Geothermal, if it's done right, you know, the owners change the filter and you have no service department, and you really don't, because it's not the place. So I can't believe that we can't make one size fits all. The best heat pump don't have to have, you know, 20 different models, especially in IB that now they own 3 or 4 manufacturers. They own Climate Master, Water Furnace, they own all of these companies. They basically accumulate, make the best equipment, make it that's also variable speed compressors that give you the best heat pumps available. Make 4 or 5 models and put them out there and give the best price so that people can make use of it. It's bizarre. I can't figure out why this cannot happen. And I used to be in the manufacturing with General Electric. We used to manufacture TVs, and TVs in those days had something like 700 components. The heat pump has, you know, maybe 50, 60 components at the most, and most of them are small stuff. Anyways, that's all I can say.
Well, I think that part of it is, and that's why, you know, hearing Con Edison talking about being interested in a different type of incentive program. You know, Jens has looked into a lot of different things as it relates to how the borehole is looked at, whether it's a battery and how that integrates into the system. Ultimately, the loop that matches the load of the home, and that's something that a utility is providing long-term, a third-party owner is providing long-term. And so there's a long-term recovery of that upfront spending. There's a revenue generation on it. Once you have a borehole in through the wall of the home, and you eliminate a lot of the guesswork that comes to what that needs to be done, now the heat pump equation, and Gino, I'm 100% on board with the variable capacity, because that fixes a lot of design issues and performance issues inside of the home. None of them are perfect, but the point where there's two pipes sticking through the wall, you open up a lot more availability for the contractors to get in there and start installing and connecting the heat pump to that system. At some point in time, I'm sure that we'll get to that point where it's viewed as a utility type piece. It's just my geothermal pipes, just like it's my gas line, just like it's my cable connection, just like it's my electric feed to the house. Any contractor can work on the equipment that attaches to those feeds, but getting them into the house is the key step that we have to get to.
Yeah, so Bob had put a couple questions in chat and now he's raised his hand.
Yeah, sort of riffing off what Kevin said there about thinking about geothermal as utility. I'm wondering if some on the driller side could tell us, you know, as I understand it, a big piece of the cost of drilling has to do with mobilization and such. Can you just hypothetically sort of give an estimate? Let's say a driller got a contract from a town or an area, and basically it said, you know, start at this address and just punch a 300-foot hole every 20 feet, you know, until you get to the end of the block, and then turn back, come the other way, and just keep moving from space to space until the day that your drill just wears out and dies. Okay. So essentially, mobilization is a question of, you know, every couple hours or every day, move 20 feet, drill a new hole, and then move on. It seems to me that's probably the minimum cost and probably the highest efficiency in drilling. Or is it? What would that do to the cost here? Should we be encouraging municipalities or towns try to take on such projects, or utilities? Like, should Con Ed be just punching holes in front of every home? Whether or not, you know, don't worry about the financing of them, but would it make sense? What would it do to the drilling costs?
Mobilization here in Canada is
The
about
material.
the 2/3 of a borehole of 600 feet. So the mobilization alone, if there's one hole to do, it's about 2/3 of a 600-foot borehole. So if you have
So if mobilization was reduced to move 20 feet, essentially you're saying that the cost of drilling the 600-foot borehole would come down by 2/3?
not quite
Yeah.
2/3, yeah, but yeah, a good chunk, yeah.
So I don't think, and you know, a major utility could absolutely chime in on something like this. If we look at the days of when we all decided to purchase horizontal directional machines and start putting in their own gas lines and putting in some of that infrastructure themselves, or why we pay a Veolia to service an entire water utility versus the city doing it, or, you know, another entity, is the degree of risk. And so, yes, we can get into the logistics discussion and reduce mobilization and get really smart on that. But one thing that we don't do a good job of comparing the United States to Europe on is the fact that they're the reason they're an older civilization than us. If you look 13,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago, the big chunks of ice, and you look at the Rockies being the youngest mountain range in the world, and you look at the different pieces from geology, there is a level of risk. And, you know, we have our friend CDM Smith that jump in on projects now, and I have worked with them, Jacob, Stantec, on municipal water wells all over the country and then all over the world. And there's X factors that will always be there. And Kevin hit on it really well with understanding the borehole better, you know, from a thermal network or from an area to just an analog 5 holes for a house. I would like to see projects that a test hole is treated much differently, and we get geophysical logs done, and we can look at a lot more than just, hey, we had a geologist on site, we logged it, we got our loop and our grout in there, and we did an in situ thermal conductivity test, and here we are. When I get called in on test holes where we've switched from mud to air, we have influenced that entire zone for 50 feet around that borehole, increasing capacity of water movement, and have completely supercharged what that borehole could look like versus what the rest of the field could look like. So I think
Right,
we need more
but
data
Brock,
on.
if you were drilling holes every 20 foot, that's essentially what you're saying. You know, you'd get a very good knowledge of what was under surface, and you'd be able to do those optimizations. So the question is, if you could get a job like that, which essentially is run the drill until the day it dies, would the drillers want that business, and what impact could it have on price, do you think?
Do we have capacity for change order for when I hit the boulder that got left in that zone 250 feet
Clearly,
away from
you'd
what
have-
we had thought?
Clearly,
Right?
you'd have
Like-
to have that. The only way you
Yeah.
can drill a hole every 20 feet is if you've got the permission to drill a hole in whatever's the necessary method.
And we saw that at Fort Knox. And I think why drilling continues to be a high, because of the cathodic protection market, you know, we get $100 to $250 a foot to do 300-foot holes. And a lot of it comes back to the risk of drilling in that right of way, the operator's qualifications, and all the X factors. So risk was shared, sure. You know, our costs can come down. There's plenty that we can do from the tribal self-taught drilling that we have here in the States to around the world that we could collaborate and become better on and more efficient. It's just the focus has just suddenly happened, right? You know, there's about 14,000 drillers in the United States, period. There's 7.9 million construction workers. 161 million people work in the United States every day. We are a flea on an elephant's ass at a circus full of elephants.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's fair to say that focus has just happened. I can assure you that the questions I'm asking right now were questions that I was asking prior to Dandelion's
We had these discussions
And
back in
Jack-
2017.
asking these questions is in part what led to Dandelion. But I think we should be talking about new business models, new ways of approaching the business. We've already seen that it's possible to create a company like Dandelion that takes on a different model and grows very rapidly and scales. Instead of just going over and over and over again, why the way we do it today isn't going to work, what we should be doing is we should be asking, how do we do it differently? And I think that's not only a question of like, you know, which rigs do we have, but also things like, how do we organize the process? How do we manage the process of drilling? You know, instead of doing one building at a time, what can we do to get to the point where we're converting neighborhoods? Can we get to the point where we're converting a whole city? Instead of saying risk here, right now, a driller is going to be worried about hitting a boulder because that may double the time he's working on that specific job. But if his task is not to drill one hole, but to drill 10,000 holes, frankly, hitting one boulder isn't going to matter at all because, yeah, one hole took twice as long to drill. Who cares? He's got 10,000 more to go, and it all averages out. So we should be thinking about new ways of organizing this business, new ways about thinking about it, and trying to create an environment in which we can be successful instead of constantly going over all the reasons why the existing model doesn't work. Apologies
Bob,
for the rant.
Can everybody hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, Bob. So I agree with you in that perspective that if there is a model that exists where I have 1,000 boreholes in a village, in a neighborhood, in a town, on the scale of 1,000, 2,000, hell, even sometimes 20 to 50 boreholes, the boulder does not impact the job. We don't focus on the tree for the forest, right? And growth in scale through concept. You know, we've talked about concept, and you know, everybody's got the next best idea on how to make the industry grow. It's got to be able to grow. It's got to be shown to be able to do it profitably. That's a key piece. But if we head down a path where Con Edison orders 10,000 boreholes, and they're going to rely on local knowledge. They're going to pull information from all of their service territory, all the people that have drilled in that area. And the first 10,000 boreholes, the experts are going to tell Con Edison the better places to do this are X, Y, and Z. We don't want to do it in A, B, and C because of this. When we look at individual projects right now, my pricing or my yes or no mentality on things is based on geology. Can I get into a job site, run 30, 40 foot of case, drill my 500 foot in 4.5 hours and go home? And can I sell 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 of those? I'm going to do those a lot more readily than where I have to spend 6, 7 hours running 200 foot of casing. And so that knowledge exists in New York State right now. We know where the low hanging fruit of volume drilling exists. We know the depths that we can go to. The minute we come to somebody that is willing to order the boreholes on that size and that scale, price will come down, profitability will go up. It becomes an interesting investment point. There's no question there. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, Bob. Industry is ready to do that right now.
If the industry is ready to do that, what I would suggest, and if it's known, and of course it can be known, where the sweet spots are, okay. What I would suggest is that some effort be put into identifying the sweet spots, talking about, then building up essentially at least a sketch of a plan for what it would take to service those sweet spots, and to make the point that in servicing doing the cherry picking, building up an industry that can handle those sweet spots, what you're doing is essentially you're building up the workforce that will be able to handle the not so sweet spots once you've picked all your cherries, right? But it would make sense to me that the industry should essentially adopt such a strategy and should plan out such a strategy. It should say things like, we should be convincing one of these 5 areas, okay, to do a mass drilling program. And if they do it, this will be the impact on cost. This will be the impact on the neighborhood, et cetera, and what it will afford us as an opportunity in the future. Is that totally crazy? Is there anybody who could do that? It's essentially, well, anyway, I won't say anything about that. But anyway,
No,
why wouldn't that make sense? Sounds to me like a great task for NY-GEO is to organize
Their
the process
businesses.
of figuring out how to get this done.
Yeah, I volunteer Cambridge, New York. That's where I live. And
But yeah,
I can
you
help
live there,
manage
but
that.
is that the right place? Would the drillers agree with you that
No.
that is the correct, the number one place in New York that they're right now they want to drill 1,000 holes?
No,
Yeah, so-
unfortunately.
So Bob,
Well, then we should ask the drillers, where in New York State do you want to drill 1,000 holes, and then let's figure out how to make that happen.
we can absolutely do this. It's exactly, earlier today I said it's up to us to make that grid. You can degree it 1 to 5, 1 to 3, look at the geology, look at the homes, the type of rig you're going to use, the nuisance that could be, the depth to water, all of those aspects that go into, no different than the discussion I had on Dig Deeper on what's going to make us successful in the water infrastructure industry, where we drill municipal water wells for groundwater versus where we're pulling from a river or a reservoir. We do this already. So yeah, I absolutely agree. We should look at New York, start dividing it up and grade what is easily able to get us to our best goal with the least amount of risk. And then you can put those $300,000, rigs that are only going to burn, 100 gallons a week versus a rig that's burning 35 gallons an hour with a compressor on it, and do it. And that's a beautiful strategy that should be done. And New York has enough diversity in geologic conditions that you're going to have a really good subset for the rest of the country to go, okay, this is achievable.
I'd be surprised if Dandelion already doesn't do this, because they probably have identified certain areas where their rigs will be the best use, and I got a feeling that's the case. I was at Oberlin College about 2 months ago, and they got 850 holes at around 600 feet, and they were doing 2 or 3 holes a day. And again, these are 20 feet apart. A couple of rigs, not the fleet, the whole fleet. So could you imagine if you had a community that you're able to punch some holes and something similar to that? But that's something definitely, the sweet spot is very important, and also the right machine. So if you have a machine that dual rotary that's able to go through all kinds of junk all the way to rock, you do have an advantage, especially now in narrow area anyways.
Yeah, if I could just say, one of the reasons Dandelion started in New York was because I spent many months doing maps of subsurface conditions across the country and comparing them with a variety of economic factors, et cetera. And we came to the conclusion that this was the place to do it. Anyway, so yeah. But this is totally the way a business should run, which is different. But the point is that that's what you do when you're building a business that's intending to scale, as opposed to just providing a service and reacting to people coming and asking you to do something. If we really want this business to scale, we should be, in fact, doing mapping. We should be figuring out where do we want to drill and drill in volume, and then how do we organize the process, not only of getting the drilling resource there and the installing resource, but also organizing the problem of getting the local communities to demand that drilling. Right? For instance, this is the sort of thing we did at Google in Kansas City, or sorry, St. Louis, where they wanted to put in the Google Fiber, okay, which is a model that I've often argued for, where essentially they said to the community, we want to put fiber in your neighborhood, but there are a lot of neighborhoods we'd like to do that. The place we'll do it first is wherever we get a commitment from the community that they'll actually purchase the service. And so what happened was community organizations, Boy Scouts groups, all kinds of people went around collecting signatures, asking Google, come and install here. And once they had, I think it was a 60 or 70% commitment, then they went in and they did the installation. So to a great extent, Google didn't even have to think about where to do the installation. Once they put together the business proposition, the communities that wanted it the most were the ones that Gordon said, do it to me. We should be thinking about that kind of thing here, because we know that the old model of just waiting for people to show up and call you and ask for asking for geothermal, that's not getting us where we need. It's not going to get us the hundreds of thousands of installations we need per year. The only way we're going to get that is if we change the business model and be much more.
It's no different than the rest of the parts of this industry, right? We have companies that have become champions at installing ground source heat pumps, and then we have full HVAC companies that don't do any of that business at all. So to focus on a water well drilling company or an industrial drilling company that has their entire legacy has been providing water, a much larger borehole with casing, the requirements, you will never drill a potable water well with a NY-GEO rig and set the size of casing with the minimum well restrictions and what is required there. So, it's very much challenging this industry for those who need the holes to take the bull by the horn and invest like Dandelion. With all of this said, our planet's on fire. We're seeing the extreme weather. We're seeing all of these aspects. We understand exactly why we have a 2030 initiative and a 2050 initiative. And we see everything else that's happening in the world. It's right here in my heart is the reason that I want to be in geothermal. We just got to figure out how it splits out, because it isn't so much about the cheapest resource to continue to exploit and destroy the planet. And that's at a rural home with a water well. Hell, they still have fuel oil delivered, or they're still getting propane delivered. So, it's a much harder demographic to penetrate there, because all they know is I can drill 100 water wells a year and I'm profitable.
Could I make a comment before we have to drop off? So if I were sitting here as an independent listener, I would have heard a lot of ideas, and I would walk away from here very confused about where this trade wants to go and what it is that needs to be done. Now, there's not a lot of people on here that were on back in 2020. I was one of them. Several others were on here, including Bob. I think Gaylord was on. Ron was on. And we decided, being prodded by NY-SERDA, tell us what you guys are going to do in the next 5 years. Put a strategic plan together. And we started on that. We kind of got wrapped around the axle with a lot of process and wordsmithing, and we really never got a plan out. Actually, what we need is some high-level strategic plan that talks about the business models and what it is, how this trade can be boosted and actually get into the mass market. And we haven't done it. Somebody needs to do it. And I think NY-GEO needs to do it, and maybe in a consortium with other geos and maybe IGSPA, okay? But a paper needs to be put out definitively saying these are the things that need to be done, and here's where the investments need to be made. And we're not all trying to put it on drilling, really. There's a whole lot of things that need to be done. I think Kevin got a little defensive there. And it's not just drilling. It's a whole bunch of stuff, but it needs to be done. And, frankly, I've been told, look, we've already won the battle. We've convinced Public Service Commission that if they don't go geothermal, we're going to kill the grid. So they already know they need geo. So they need us to do this. And we're still kind of, I don't know, flailing a little bit here. So I don't know how we put it together, but we definitely need to put something together.
Yeah. So Jim, to that, the IGSPA has put back together their kind of advisory group. So there are, I think, 15 state associations, and we meet monthly. And we'll be, I think all of us but two will be in Vegas, and we've scheduled time to meet and talk about a lot of these issues and how we collectively can work closer with IGSPA on a global level. Like, NY-GEO is doing this, and Illinois is doing this, and Iowa's doing that. So, what can we come together to advance our industry so that we're not nickel and diming ourselves, but we're using IGSPA's power and the power of all of us together to do that. So I'll bring that up and say, this is
with one voice. All of us on this should be able to get up and say, we all think this is what needs to be done, and not be debating and one guy saying something, somebody else saying something. It makes everybody else confused, like we don't have our act together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think these are good conversations though, because, we have guys out in the field that are doing the work, and do we need more of them? Do we need less of them? Do we need more equipment? Do we need not,
But at some point we have to come up with a consensus and agree on it and put it on paper. And that's what we're going to go with. And it doesn't have to be one way. It can be a bunch of alternatives, but we need to articulate it so other people can understand it and they're not confused.
I don't want to kind of draw this whole meeting out, but 2 minutes. I would really like to add a kind of spoke to this kind of more comprehensive idea of, having a unified kind of mission over the next 5 years. To Bob's point, Dandelion came because as a part of that, there was a subsurface investigation that proved that, you know, this is a reasonably good area to be drilling in. For the past few years, we have not been recording anything about geothermal boreholes in New York State, and that's crazy. I appreciate now, with the 500-foot law being repealed, that NY-GEO has kind of stepped in and provided a form that everybody's asked to fill out. But I think all of that has to be cycled back in to the DEC, and maybe this is an effort that NYSERDA could get behind, or NY-GEO could get behind. But all that data has to be compiled somewhere, and then it has to be presented in a easily accessible format for engineers in Manhattan and for drillers, you know, in the boonies, to both be able to look at the same thing and say, depth of bedrock here, 20 feet plus minus 5 feet. Because that enables small-time residential drillers to do work wherever they have to. And that gives us a better picture for commercial work as well. And
All right, guys, I'm just going to jump in real quick. It's Beth Gadetti from DEC.
oh,
And I hope, Colin, that you don't mind
Beth,
me.
we have talked. We've talked about
Yeah.
the water well inventory.
We have, and we do have the water well inventory. And I want to point out, it goes directly to your point. NYSERDA, the State Museum and USGS are all interested in mapping this stuff. The museum is putting out depth to bedrock for the express purpose, is my understanding, of helping out the geothermal industry. So we are trying to get there. We do have the water well data. It's all online on DEC Info Locator. So if anybody needs data, it is out there. We don't currently track the geothermal wells, so we don't have that data. That remains to be decided, you know, over the course of the next year and years beyond that, to see if we would be able to start collecting that data and recording it, probably in a similar way to the water well data that we do now.
Yeah, and I will say that we're working on that. We put out that form, and the goal is that is going to be a project that NY-GEO will work on in tandem with the DEC. But until we get to, and Kevin's been working very, very closely with them, but that is the goal, is to be able to, I think, you know, be able to know where all those boreholes are. And Bob shared a map. And then I think on the water well site, there's a really cool map that has the state with the wells on there. So the hope, I think, is to eventually and very soon be able to have something like that.
That's great.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the whole integration of the USGS and what they released for the 5 boroughs, plus the water well survey, plus the oil and gas wells, all together gives us a real picture that kind of grows everything from the bottom up. So I'm really glad NY-GEO is involved in that. And thank you, Beth.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm glad to hear you guys are all interested in that too. I do think it would help the industry.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, sorry, go ahead, Brock, and then
I'll be very fast. I'm going to challenge the industry that as we look at size of bore fields and what we're doing, if we're going to do 10,000 holes in a utility neighborhood or whatever, what % should actually be a reasonable test hole with good geophysical logs? And we're not doing them. We have the opportunity, but if we were truly doing geophysical logs on top of just logging that, if we said 1% for 10,000 holes, or Ball State, we did 5 holes for 3,600 holes. How is that a good subset? Why? How would we have gotten good data?
Okay, well, thank you. That was amazing. Great conversation. So Jackie had sent some ideas. We'll share those. The next one is November 10th, which is the designated Veterans Day. Just by a show of hands like this, if you normally come to these and want to continue, should we have it on that Friday, or should we look at a different Friday that doesn't fall on what's a scheduled holiday? Jim, yes. Colin, yes. Everybody else is blacked out. Okay, we'll move forward. with Friday the 10th. So look for a message on that. If you have a topic that you would like to discuss, send that to JR or myself, and we'll get that on the dockets. And I appreciate everybody's time and energy. Have a really great weekend. Big geothermal drill hugs to everybody. And we will work together, and Jim will talk more about your ideas before I go to Expo and get that in front of that group. And I know we've talked about it before.
Yeah, check your email. I just sent you an email.
Okay, great.
Have a good weekend,
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
everyone.